On the Horizon, an original Wizard 101 story by onthehorizon.com. Chapter 1, An Ending and a Beginning. Narrated by Daniel Deathcaster. She stepped up to the door and looked around the area from the small stoop. It wasn't as big as her old home in the desert, not as sprawling with its landscaping, but it was home all the same. After a long day of patrolling the spiral, it felt good to be at her place. The nice brick manor was small and quaint for her and her little pets. The park across the way gave the animals room to play, and she managed to get an underground garage to store some of her belongings. "Yep, Sasha, this will work out just fine," she told her trusty sidekick. The Colossus looked up to her and grunted its approval as they made their way inside. Scarlet had bought the Maldivian apartment a few weeks ago, after her long campaign with Malistor had finally ended. The spiral was safe at the moment, yet there was the occasional rise of a boss or minion who threatened security. But the world was in no immediate danger. She unpacked a few things that she picked up in Wizard City while perusing the bazaar. "That should do it," she said as she put a few vases and books away. As she looked around the room, she had a feeling that there was a certain something else she was going to need to make the area complete. She didn't know what it was, but she knew she'd find it once she was back at the market. Came the familiar echo of her friend, Chris Deathweaver. "Is it ready?" "Sure, port," she replied to him with a smile. Within moments, the familiar scent of leather and dragon's blood wafted its way into the room. "So," he said, scrutinizing his surroundings. "So, yes?" Scarlet appreciated his criticism. Chris was a crafter, a master artisan at that. He took to building like he took to his necromancy. He loved the aspects of deconstructing something to mold it into something new, something different. Scarlet was an artisan too, but she didn't have the yen for it like Chris. Where she saw a hole in the wall that needed fixing, Chris saw a built-in bookshop for a breakfast nook that could be there instead. Scarlet loved to decorate more than the hands-on work that went with crafting. She liked pretty things and loved to surround herself with them. Yet she loved a good challenge, so she strived to be an artisan just so she can have the title. "It's quaint compared to the vista," he said as moved around the small space. "I know. Still nice. But the vista with the statue in the ground? I mean, you got it for a steal," Chris said with a small hint of jealousy. "Yes," she said as she watched him move around the room. The desert dwelling she had was a good sale, but she felt she had outgrown it, which said a lot considering how big it was. Chris looked around thoughtfully as he scanned the interior. His tone was getting more reserved as his eyes looked over every nook and cranny. "You're still decorating?" he asked as he looked at a ruined painting. "Yes, why?" "Nothing," he said quickly before moving upstairs. Scarlet smirked at him as she followed. After critiquing a few things, the flooring, the molding, and something about the wallpaper, Chris settled into a padded chair and started with his stories. He was never short of them. It was usually about the day he had while helping a new student, or some fierce battle with an Oni. Scarlet used the time to move around some items and put up a few keepsakes she still had created. She laughed a bit as she listened to his recount of the day. His reverie caused her to think back on her own journey. A lot of time had passed since she was a novice at Ravenwood. Now she was a grand thaumaturge. She had seen a lot along the way and had gained a mass amount of experience. She was no longer afraid of the minions that had scared her, no longer hesitant to step into battle, or to help out when needed. For the first time since coming to the spiral, she felt she had a place in the wizarding world. Yet she still felt like something was missing, and realized what it was as she glanced down to a photo on her desk. It was the picture of some friends that had just disappeared. Boris Ghostcaller and Esme Downcloud. The two had fought alongside her as they made their way to Dragonspire. After the threesome split up at the Basilicus portals, she lost contact with them. She looked around the hatchery, Crystal Grove, and even the roost of Malistor's lair, but there was no word or sight of them. There was even a rumor they had stepped through a portal to some other world. "Grizzleheim?" she had asked. "No," said the other. "This place looked different." Scarlet didn't take those words to heart, since the person was talking over his Steiner veil. Could have been seeing things for all she knew. What other world could it be? Scarlet? Chris's voice startled her from close behind. She didn't realize her mind had drifted off while he was talking. Something wrong? Nothing, she managed to say as she put away their faces. She shook off her nostalgia and smiled as he went back to talking about furniture placement. While I was in Mushu, I picked this up in one of the little shops there. He handed her a small brown paper-wrapped item. It felt a bit heavy for its size, but Chris was known to give her things with odd significance. Muda's Guide to Feng Shui Living. Scarlet smiled at the book. Thought you might like it, you being a decorating grand thaumaturge. Scarlet was about to reply back when a trickling sensation hit her spine. Jonathan Deshield stood at her room's entrance. John? He nodded to acknowledge himself to her, then turned to Chris and did the same. Although she noticed it took a bit longer for him to do so. Jonathan seemed to appraise Chris as he looked in his direction. The two had never met in person, although she had spoken about them to each other on numerous occasions. A moment of your time, please? Jonathan asked as he looked in Scarlet's direction. Of course. Jonathan turned and walked over to the balcony directly across from the room. Chris and Scarlet exchanged shrugs as he left their sight. I'll be over. Chris pointed to a chair where he had been sitting before. Walking up to Jonathan, she noticed how deep and reflective his expression was as he looked towards the stars. His dark pupils emulated the night sky he was watching. Scarlet Dunestaff, he started, which troubled her. He never used her full name before. Have you sensed anything lately? Something in the distance is brewing. Scarlet looked at him more closely. Jonathan Deshield was more serious than most of her other friends, so she was careful not to sound stupid in front of him. Although he had some moments where he could be lighthearted, Scarlet guessed that this was not one of them. I've sensed nothing out of the usual, John. He looked at her, this time giving her the same appraising eye that he had given Chris. You know, I wish you'd have learned more necromancy. It really does suit you. You know, I've never taken to death like you and Chris have. Maybe not. But I've never seen you squeamish about it in battle. He smiled. I would say the same for you, John. Maybe that's why. He nodded as his smile widened at her comment. Then he went back to appraising her once more. She had an odd feeling that he was looking for something. Something in her soul that he was trying to fish out. It was never the death that bothered you, nor the battle. It's the foreshadowing that you never liked. Seeing someone's death. Jonathan seemed to hit upon his answer. Scarlet was an ice student at heart, who took to fire and storm spells because they fit her own temperament. She learned from life spells for insurances and some balance to bring all together. Death wasn't something she took to. She learned a bit from it, and even made some friends out of it. But necromancy spooked her, particularly the area of prophecy. She didn't mind defeating their enemies in battle because in her mind, the odds were pretty even with the foes she faced. But to see it before it happened? Her heart quickened as she thought of her friends, Boris and Esme. Their absence waned on her patience. She'd searched where she could, but alas, nothing. Where are you going with this, John? She asked abruptly, shaking off her loneliness. Jonathan looked taken aback by her briskness. I didn't mean to anger you, he said. Scarlet felt her insides pinch. The war had taken so many from her. She didn't mean to fend off what few friends she had left. She took a breath for calm. Sorry. Jonathan nodded and paused a moment before he spoke. I didn't mean to cause trouble, Scarlet. Just wanted to see if you know of any. Reports are coming in of something coming towards the spiral. Something? What exactly? Nothing certain, but... He paused as he looked away from her for a second. Some have... seen things. Oh. She knew what that meant. And she knew if he was sharing this bit with her, then it had to be something serious. There was a rule among grand necromancers that they didn't discuss things seen in prophecy outside of their school. They did not want to interfere with the natural order of things. Of course, they did what they could if the danger threatened all of humanity. but certain things are seen as fate, so it is left alone. Silence stood briefly between them as Scarlet pondered what he said. She looked out into the sky to see if she could pick up anything, but her senses were so dulled by all the fighting that for all she knew, trouble could be knocking at her doorstep. She felt the chill in the air, colder than any balefrost she had ever cast, but from what and where she couldn't tell. Maybe it was the war that made her feel so on edge. Or maybe... Do you have some kind of cleaning potion? My wraith ate some of your incense, and it's not agreeing with him. Chris stood aside as he heard his pet made an awful noise in the hall. I believe that is my cue to leave, Jonathan said. No, wait, I can... No, it's my pet, Chris objected. I'll clean up after it. Just shoot me in the right direction. Scarlet aimed him towards the kitchen downstairs. As Chris Deathweaver made his way with his sickly companion, she noticed Jonathan looking at him more closely. When he got out of sight, Jonathan directed his attention again to Scarlet. Whatever comes, you must know we all have to work together on this, he said. Of course, don't we always? She asked. But then, the look he gave answered her question. It was the same look he had when she explained why she couldn't join him before. She was helping a friend at the Coven in Grizzleheim, when he had called out to her for help. She couldn't leave even if she wanted to. She wasn't the one to drop a friend and run, even if it meant her running to some other form of danger. She had to help. When the battle was over, she quickly poured it to Jonathan, only to find him frozen. Whatever it was that he was fighting stunned him and left him behind. She found him standing at an entryway to some cave in Ravenscar. His eyes were locked, staring menacingly ahead into the dark cavern. At what? She had no clue, and he didn't seem to recall. At that time, there was nothing she could do but to take him to Wizard City, where a healer undid the spell. All along the way she kept saying, I'm here, John, right with you. But she wondered if her words had gotten through. After she explained what had happened, he had said he understood yet from the day on. She wondered if he had ever forgiven her for choosing poorly, or for that matter, if he had forgiven the friend she had chosen to fight with, the man who left the room to tend to his ailing pet. Just know, Scarlet, that I'll be there for you if you need. Yes, John, same here. He nodded to acknowledge her once more. Then Jonathan Deathshield made his way to the stairs and out of Scarlet's small apartment. She watched him leave from the top of the steps as he walked out the front door. Chris Deathweaver appeared seconds later at the bottom. He looked at Scarlet, then the door, then back at her again. So what was that about? Nothing, she said, although she knew there was something to Jonathan's visit that he wasn't sharing. What was even more strange was that Jonathan never used the door to leave.